Welcome everyone. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through some JavaScript commands that you can use to manipulate the DOM. And specifically, I'm going to show you how I use JavaScript to fix a problem that I came across. Here's the problem. I was watching this video on YouTube, which is all about the chess notation. And there is this paper here on the left. She writes the moves and then she writes the chess notation. But then at some point in the video, there's something weird happening. Okay, so here's the problem. Like at some point, exactly at the point where she tries to write down the last move and the notation, there are these pop-ups popping up on top of the screen, and there's no way like to actually see what's under the screen. The way that I solved this was to actually open the inspector, find out these elements, which are basically HTML elements, and then create a bookmarklet, which is basically a bookmark that runs JavaScript. So this bookmark at the top here enables me to toggle these overlays on and off. So this is what we're going to do, and we're going to learn some very, very cool and useful DOM API commands in JavaScript. I'm going to inspect this element, and the first thing I want to do is to go through the inspector and find the element that is overlaying on top of the screen. And if I hover over here, you will see there's this div with class YTP, short for YouTube player, C element, and this is the left widget. And if I scroll down and I hover over on the next div with class YTPC element, that's the second widget. Probably these are the two elements that I need to delete. Of course, I can open up the inspector, click on the elements, then hit delete on my keyboard and delete that, and also select the one. But I really wanted to have some kind of like a button that allows me to do this without opening up the inspector, and selecting the elements. And also, what if I wanted like to get these overlays back? So let me refresh once again. Let me inspect. And you can see this is like the anchor tag, like the button that you click. And then if I move up, these are the nested children elements that are part of this container element. And this is the first widget and this is the second one. So the first thing I did is try to look at these classes and the properties, the HTML properties to see whether I could find some property or attribute that is unique to just these two overlay elements, so that I can easily target them on the page and delete them. Now the class YTPC element looked quite, I think, something that could be used to identify these two elements. As you can see, there are other class names like channel or channel this or medium round. The rest of the classes and the attributes didn't seem like they were used to identify this particular overlay windows. So this is the class that got me interested. And what I can do is I can go to the console and I can use the document query selector all to capture all the elements that have this class. And perhaps there are more elements that have this class, but fortunately for me, this class gave me just the two elements. So the document query selector all gives you a list, a node list, which is a special kind of an array with the elements that you get using this query selector. So as you can see, these are exactly the overlay windows that I'm interested in. I was fortunate enough to find the class that indeed is used only for the overlay. So we have what we need. We have this command that gives us access to these two elements. So let me save them in a variable. Let's say overlays. And now I have the overlays list. I can pick the first one and see what's going on in here, or pick the second one and kind of like manipulate these through the console, or maybe store them in a variable and then access the properties. Now I can use the remove method to completely remove this element from the screen, but this is not what I wanted to do. I wanted just to toggle on and off. So one way that I could do it was to go and change the style, and through the style property change the display and change it something to none, which basically hides an HTML element. So let me go back to the overlays and I will pick the first one. I will go to the style and then display, So there's no inline display for this element, but it's still showing there's a default display property. So if I inspect this element and I go in here, I presume this is it. You can see there's an inline style. There's a width set, there's a height, there's a left, top, but there's no inline display. This doesn't mean that the element doesn't have a display property set, because by default these divs have the display property set to block. This is not an inline setting, but this is what we call a computed setting. So how do I find about this computed display property? I go in here, I go to the computed panel, and in here I'm going to type a display, and you can see that the default computed display setting for this element, not the inline but just the default computed, is set to block, which means I can override this by going in here and setting now the inline style to none, which is going to override the computed display property. You can see here right now the inline style has width, height, left, and top, but not display. So if I set the display, the inline style display to none, you will see that here's the inline style. Now the inline style property has been updated with a display none. So before that we had the default computed display property, which is block, and now we have an inline style property with display set to none, and that's why the element is hidden. Now if I set this display back to either an empty or block, it will show the element once again. So this is a trick that I'm going to use to hide and show the element, and both of them. I will go back to the console, and I'm going to go back to the lists, to the overlay, which is the list of these elements. So I want to loop over this list, and for each element either hide it or show it if it's already hidden. So the idea is to loop over them. I can loop over them with a for loop. So overlays, I can use the for loop, and for each element. I'm missing something here. Okay, this is for of, so for const element of overlays, and I get a loop with 2 iterations where each element, as you can see, is here. So I can use the for loop, and then inside the brackets, inside the loop, I can do something with each of these elements, but I prefer to use the for each method, which allows me to run a function, a callback function, and inside this function I have access to the element. Same thing, I prefer this syntax. What do we need to do here? First of all, we need to check whether the elements are already being displayed and hide them, if that's the case, or if they're hidden, show them again. So kind of like a toggle. How can we do this? Now, by default, remember that there's no inline style set, at least for the second element. For this one, I think I have an inline style set to display none. Let me set this back to L style. Let me just revert to the style which didn't have like a display block. Let me see if that got rid of style width. Okay, so now we're back to the original style property, which contains no style. Okay, so looping through these 2 elements, I'm going to check whether they either have a computed display property set to block, or if they have an inline style set to block. Why is that? Because by default, when I open the page, these 2 elements are going to have a computed display set to block, but not the inline style. So if I try to use the element inline style, you will see it's empty because they do not contain the inline property. But if I check the computed display, we will see that it's set to block. So how can I get the computed property? It's pretty easy. First of all, I will say, so this is the inline display. I will set this to the inline display. Okay, and then for the computed, I have the computed display. There's a command get computed style, which gives me all the computed properties of the element, and through that object that contains all the computed properties, I can pick the computed property that I prefer. For example, display. So you can see here that for both of these elements, the inline style is set to an empty string. There's no inline style display, but the computed style display property is set to block. Let me give you an idea of how this works. So let me get the overlays. So let me grab the computed styles for the first element. You will see that this is a huge object that contains all the default so-called computed CSS properties. All these are all the CSS properties that an element can have. So I can say display, you can see it's block, what else, like, I don't know, width, and then height, and so forth. So this is how we can grab the computed properties of HTML elements. Through the inspector, we can go to the computed tab and we can manually see and inspect these computed properties. But with JavaScript, we have this API. Okay, let me go back here. So in here, I'm checking both the inline and the computed display because either can be set, and I want to hide the elements if one of these two is set to block. I will just comment this for now and I'm going to say if I display equals to a block, or if the computed display property is set to block, then turn the element into a hidden element. So I'm going to set the inline style into display none, which is going to hide the elements. But the elements are not removed. They're not, they're inside the DOM. They're just, as you can see, they're still here, but the inline style now is set to display none, so we can now see what's underneath the YouTube video. If the display is set to block, we hide them. Else, if they're not set to block, so they're actually hidden, we change the display back to block. Let's see if this works. So now the inline display was set to none, and we revert back to block. And if I run this code again, you can see that it works as a toggle. That's cool, but I also want to create this button so I can do this quickly and also without having to open the inspector. What I have to do now is I need to grab this code along with the first command that was grabbing the elements. Grab the elements, store them in the variable, loop through the variable, and then toggle on and off. So I'm going to select all these and copy them, and I'm going to go to this site. You can find the link below. It's called Bookmarklet, and basically you paste your JavaScript code here, and it gives you this minified like bookmarklet that you can either copy it into a bookmarklet, into a bookmark that you have here in your tab, or you can just grab this here. Let me delete this one, and then here's the bookmarklet. I can edit it, and I can set this to YouTube no overlay. So give it whatever name you want, and now when you click it, it will run this JavaScript. So instead of a link, instead of a bookmark that will redirect you to a page, it's going to run some JavaScript. That's what the bookmarklet is. Bookmark that just runs some JavaScript, which is pretty cool. So now every time I click this, it will run some code. Let me close this, refresh, go back to the place where, okay, here's the two overlays. Let's see if this works. It works, and now I can toggle these overlays on and off, which is pretty cool. I didn't have to install any extension, and I can see them, and I can also see what's underneath them. That was it. I hope you learn how to manipulate the DOM. I hope that you learn how useful these commands that we used are, especially the get computed style. And also, I think this will inspire you to create some bookmarklet. Thank you for watching, and please like, subscribe, and leave your comments, or if you have on some interesting use cases for the Bookmarklet, please let me know in the comments section. You will find the Bookmarklet link in the description. So once again, thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye bye.